Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. If you're diving on into Path of Exile 2, one of the first big decisions you'll make is picking your class. Now, this choice is huge because it really shapes how your character will play and handle challenges early on. Each class comes with its own set of strengths, weaknesses, and unique playstyles, so it's important to pick one that fits how you want to approach the game. Whether you like to charge into battle, swinging swords, or sit back and cast spells, there's a class that's perfect for your preferred playstyle. But here's the thing, the class you choose at the start isn't just about your character's abilities, it's about setting the stage for your journey. As you progress, your class choice will open up different pathways and opportunities, giving you the tools you'll need to face whatever challenges come your way. So, while the start may feel a bit limiting, don't worry, every class has the potential to evolve into something powerful. Stick with it, and you'll see that no matter what, your class will help you conquer the obstacles ahead. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking classes in Path of Exile 2. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. First, let's start with the base classes, then we will move on to ascendancy classes.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Monk and Witch. Alright, let's dive into the Monk and Witch classes in Path of Exile 2. If you're looking for a class that gives you that fast-paced, in-your-face action, the Monk might catch your eye. This guy can dish out decent damage to groups of enemies and bosses, all while zipping around the battlefield with impressive mobility. But here's the catch, he's squishy. Like, really squishy. Being a melee class means he's often up close and personal with enemies, and let's face it, getting hit doesn't feel great when you're not built to take it. What sets the Monk apart is his need for some serious mechanical skill. It's not just about attacking, it's about knowing when to dodge, when to strike, and weaving through combos to really deal that damage. Sounds fun, right? But it can also feel like a juggling act, especially when you're just starting out. And in the early game, things can be a bit rough since your skills are limited. Those really cool abilities? Yeah, they're locked behind some progress, so you'll have to grind a little to feel like you're hitting your stride. Now, if you're after something more chill, but still capable of bringing the pain, the Witch might be the way to go. This class lets you sit back and relax while your minions do most of the heavy lifting. Whether it's defensive or offensive, your summoned friends got you covered. Simple skills like Bone Storm or Detonated Dead make it easy to understand and execute your strategy without too much hassle. It's great for players who want a more laid-back experience, but don't let that fool you. This girl can deal some serious damage when you're set up right. That said, there are some trade-offs with the Witch. Her skill variety is a bit lacking, and let's not forget about her reliance on spirits. You're going to need some solid resource management to keep up, and the time investment can be pretty steep. Early game struggles are real here too, and you'll need specific builds and resources to get her to the point where she feels as powerful as other classes. So, while she might seem easygoing at first, there's a bit more depth under the surface that you'll need to master if you want to truly shine. The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Ranger, Sorcerer, and Warrior. Alright, let's dive into the juicy details of the A-tier classes in Path of Exile 2. These are the classes that hit the sweet spot. They're fun, effective, and offer plenty of ways to kick some serious butt. But, like with anything that's good, they do also have their little quirks that you'll want to keep an eye on. So, if you're aiming for something solid, but not too overpowered, these are your go-to picks. Let's start with the Ranger. Now, the Ranger is that class that can melt through hordes of enemies without breaking a sweat. She's all about that AoE damage, and with her high mobility and evasion stats, she can dodge out of tough spots like a pro. The recent nerfs? Yeah, they did shake things up a bit, but she's still holding strong. The only real downside is her fragility. If you're not careful with positioning, you'll be a squishy little target. So, you'll want to focus on stacking evasion or armor to keep her alive. Still, for the most part, she's an absolute joy to play, especially when you're clearing out big packs of enemies. Then there's the Sorceress. If you like variety, this class is your best friend. With her access to multiple elements and ailments, she can flex and adapt to pretty much any situation. Need to burn something down? She's got fire. Want to freeze those enemies in their tracks? Ice is ready to go, but there's always a but. She's fragile. Like, don't even think about getting hit, fragile. Plus, she's a bit on the immobile side, which makes her tricky to play. Balancing offense with a bit of defense is key to making the Sorceress work, but when you do, it's so rewarding. Now, let's talk about the warrior. If you want to get up close and personal, the warrior's your guy. He's all about smashing faces and dealing some seriously good AoE and single target damage. The best part? He can take a hit, thanks to his high survivability from strength-related passive nodes. That being said, melee combat has its own set of problems. You'll often find yourself in the middle of a mob, surrounded and trying not to get wrecked. And the warrior's builds, they're a bit limited. Sure, there's a solid endgame setup with armor-breaking builds, but you're going to find yourself using the same skills over and over. Despite that, all three of these classes are still top-tier options for players who want a bit of challenge but also want to feel powerful. The ranger's speed, the sorceress's adaptability, and the warrior's raw strength each brings something unique to the table. Sure, they have their weaknesses, but they're also strong enough to push through tough situations. They're definitely worth considering if you're looking for a class that feels both rewarding and challenging. The key takeaway here is that Path of Exile 2 is all about balance. None of these classes are invincible, but they all have a solid toolkit that can be adapted to your playstyle. Whether you like to avoid damage, dish it out at range, or wade into the middle of a fight with your sword raised high, these A-tier classes give you plenty of options. It's all about finding what fits your rhythm and running with it. So, which class are you thinking about picking for your next character? Let me know in the comments, and feel free to share any tips or fun builds you've been working on. The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Mercenary. Alright, let's talk about the Mercenary class in Path of Exile 2. This bad boy is an absolute powerhouse. If you're looking to dish out crazy damage from the get-go, the Mercenary has you covered. With the ability to mix and match elemental damage types and use crossbow rounds, you can customize your build to fit pretty much any situation. Whether you're mowing down mobs or going toe-to-toe with a boss, this class shines in versatility and damage output. Plus, its range makes it a lot easier to survive, and those early passive nodes that boost survivability, total game changer. But hey, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. While the Mercenary might look like a breeze to play, there's a bit of a learning curve here. You've got to manage ammunition and deal with reloading, which can throw you off a bit if you're used to just spamming your abilities without a second thought. It's not a deal breaker though, it's more like a cool little challenge that adds depth to your gameplay. So if you're ready to handle a class that offers both insane power and a little extra thinking, the Mercenary is definitely worth picking up. Now let's talk about Ascendancy classes. The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Chronomancer and Blood Mage. Alright, let's dive into two classes that might leave you scratching your head a little, the Chronomancer and the Blood Mage. These two ascendancies have some interesting abilities, but also come with their own set of challenges. So, if you're thinking about trying them out in Path of Exile 2, get ready for a roller coaster of highs and lows. Let's start with the Chronomancer. Now don't get me wrong, this class can pack a punch in terms of offense. It's all about applying those lingering spells to control mobs and bosses, but here's the catch. You'll need to constantly pay attention to where you're standing. If you slip up in positioning, your temporal rift can turn into a nightmare, especially since the Chronomancer doesn't exactly excel at surviving when the heat is on. You've got some mobility with Temporal Rift, but it's a double-edged sword. If you're not careful, you could end up in a bad spot, and all that offense won't matter if you can't stay alive. Now, let's talk about the Blood Mage. This class is a bit of a wild ride thanks to its Sanguimancy ascendancy. Essentially, every time you spend mana, you drain your own life. Fun, right? But the twist is that you can use life remnants from kills and crits to overcharge your life, potentially making you tankier. Sounds like a cool mechanic, but here's where it gets tricky. Blood Mage doesn't play well with certain witch builds like minions or DOT, so if you're hoping for an easy synergy with those, you might be a bit disappointed. The real magic happens when you focus on crit builds, as Blood Mage buffs crit damage and life remnants, letting you tank like a pro if you can make it work. The Blood Mage though suffers from a lack of flexibility. You won't be able to just slap this ascendancy onto any build and hope for the best. It's a class that requires specific attention to how you manage your life and mana, and if you're not ready to dive into the nitty-gritty of crit-based synergies, you might find yourself stuck in a cycle of underwhelming performance. If you enjoy high-risk, high-reward playstyles, though Blood Mage could be the class that scratches that itch, just be ready for a bit of a learning curve. So, there you have it. The Chronomancer and Blood Mage are fascinating, but they're definitely not beginner-friendly. Whether you like the idea of manipulating time or draining your own life for greater power, these ascendancies are all about managing those risks. If you can get the timing right and figure out the right builds, you might just find a gem. But be warned, they aren't for the faint of heart. The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Warbringer, Pathfinder, and Acolyte of Chayula. Let's talk about some of the underappreciated Ascendancy classes in Path of Exile 2 that might not be top tier, but still bring some fun and utility to the table. We're diving into the B tier today, where you'll find classes that have their own unique strengths, but also come with some limitations that hold them back from breaking into the S tier. These classes can still shine in the right hands, so if you're looking for something a bit off the beaten path, this could be your jam. First up, we've got the Warbringer class. Now, this one is all about building around support and defense. You're looking at buffs to war cries, shield usage, armor break, and even totems. It's like the perfect class for those who love tanking and controlling the battlefield. Warbringer shines when it comes to survivability, thanks to skills like Jade Heritage and Turtle Charm. But here's the catch, if you're expecting big flashy damage numbers, you might be disappointed. The class doesn't do much to directly boost your damage output, aside from some armor break nodes. So, if you're all about that raw power, you might find yourself craving a bit more oomph. Next, let's take a look at the Pathfinder class. If you're a fan of concoctions and debuffs, this class might be right up your alley. Pathfinder brings high burst damage potential with its concoctions, which can inflict a range of nasty ailments on enemies. With the right build, you can definitely dish out some impressive hits. The problem though is that the Pathfinder's damage tends to drop off once you're in the endgame, especially when compared to other classes. On top of that, the gameplay can feel a bit clunky, and the low survivability really hurts. If you're not careful, you'll be looking at a lot of downtime while trying to manage all those concoctions. Moving on to the Acolyte of Chayula class. This one's an interesting case because it can definitely deal decent damage, especially with the right setup. The problem, however, is in the synergy department. The Acolyte is all about darkness, but this can split your focus when you're playing a monk, as the monk usually works better with elements like cold or lightning. You're essentially juggling two separate ideas, which can make it tricky to fully optimize the class. Not to mention, the trade-off between darkness and spirit feels a bit off. You might find yourself getting better results with persistent skills instead of relying on the Acolyte's more niche mechanics. It's a learning curve that could make your investment of time and resources feel less rewarding. Now, don't get me wrong, these classes are far from trash. They can absolutely be fun to play and bring something unique to the table. But compared to the powerhouse classes in the higher tiers, they tend to fall short in terms of overall consistency and effectiveness. If you enjoy experimenting and are willing to put in the work to master these quirks, you'll get plenty of enjoyment from them. Ultimately, the beauty of Path of Exile 2 is in the variety of classes and how they can cater to different playstyles. B tier might not be the top of the heap, but it still holds some cool potential for players who like to think outside the box. Whether you're building for defense with Warbringer, experimenting with concoctions as a Pathfinder, or trying to get the most out of the Acolyte of Chayula, there's always room for creativity. Just don't expect to be the most powerful player in the game. At least not until you've got the hang of it. So, if you're ever feeling bored of the usual meta and want to try something a little different, these B tier classes might be just the change you need. With the right setup, they can still be a blast to play, even if they're not the absolute best in terms of raw power. Give them a shot and see what you think. You might just surprise yourself. The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Deadeye, Gemling Legionnaire, Witch Hunter, and Titan. Let's dive into some of the classes in Path of Exile 2 that really make you feel like you're building something powerful, but with a few little quirks here and there that you've got to keep in mind. Today, we're talking about A-tier Ascendancy classes, those that are solid, reliable, and absolutely great for building your character into an unstoppable force. So, if you want to get the most out of your Ranger, Warrior, or Mercenary, stick around. First up, we've got the Deadeye class for Rangers. Now, I'll be honest, this class isn't exactly going to help you tank a bunch of hits, but it's all about mobility and damage. If you like zipping around and absolutely wrecking enemies at any distance, the Deadeye is for you. Skills like Gathering Winds and Endless Munitions let you shoot from afar and quickly run circles around the battlefield. Plus, if you're all about stacking up frenzy charges, Avidity is a must-have. Just remember, you'll need to invest heavily in your evasion to stay alive, because while Tailwind helps, it's not a full shield from danger. Next, let's talk about the Gemling Legionnaire. a class that is all about giving your gems a little extra shine. Whether you're slotting in a bunch of new support gems or buffing your attributes, the flexibility here is amazing. Not to mention, you'll have some surprisingly good elemental resistances for a range class, which definitely gives you a bit of a defensive edge. The class lets you build in so many different ways, so if you like experimenting with your setup while still dealing decent damage, the Gemling Legionnaire has your back. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the Witch Hunter. If you're a fan of the Mercenary class, then the Witch Hunter will definitely catch your attention. It boosts your damage output with some solid nodes, like the one that gives you a chance to explode enemies when they die. Sounds awesome, right? But here's the catch, survivability takes a hit. You've got this barrier node that shields you from elemental damage, but it also halves your evasion and armor. So while you're dishing out some serious damage, you might find yourself dying a bit more often, especially if you're going solo and facing those endgame bosses who can take you out with one well-placed hit. Moving on to the Titan class, which is just absolutely great for boosting the warrior's offense and defense. If you're into aftershocks, heavy stuns, and empowered attacks, the Titan brings some serious power to the table. But the real gem here is the hulking form node, which massively boosts the benefits you get from small passive nodes. However, not everything in the Titan skill tree is a winner. While hulking form is amazing, some of the other nodes are a bit niche and don't add new active skills, which can feel limiting if you like having more options. While the Deadeye might not be the best at taking damage, its offensive capabilities and mobility make it a fantastic pick for those who want to keep enemies at a distance and outmaneuver them at every turn. It's all about burst damage and making sure you're too fast for your enemies to catch up with. But, like I said, it comes with the price of needing to invest a lot into evasion to keep those hits from landing. The Gemling Legionnaire, on the other hand, is all about flexibility. If you love playing with your skill setup and want a class that can adapt to different situations, then this class really opens up the possibilities. You can go for a more defensive build without sacrificing too much damage, which is pretty rare for a range class. Plus, those elemental resistances will give you some much needed protection, especially when things start to get tough. And then there's the Witch Hunter, which can bring the pain in terms of damage output. You'll be blowing enemies up left and right, but you might need to get a bit crafty when it comes to survivability. The barrier node can help, but if you don't watch your positioning and keep an eye on your evasion, those tough enemies can really make you regret stepping into their line of sight. Finally, the Titan is just pure brute strength. You'll be shaking the ground with your aftershocks, knocking enemies down with heavy stuns, and empowering your attacks for some serious damage. While it might lack a bit in the variety department, its core strengths are undeniable. If you want to play a tanky, heavy-hitting warrior, the Titan's your go-to. So, whether you're a speed demon ranger, a gem-loving legionnaire, a damage-dealing witch hunter, or a titan who loves to flex, these A-tier ascendancy classes in Path of Exile 2 will make sure you're set up for success. Just remember, no class is perfect, and each comes with its own strengths and weaknesses, so pick the one that matches your playstyle and get ready to crush it in the game. The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Invoker, Infernalist, and Stormweaver. Alright, buckle up, Path of Exile 2 fans, because today we're diving deep into some of the best ascendancy classes you can pick if you want to totally wreck your enemies while having a blast. First up, we've got the Invoker class, and let me tell you, this one is an absolute monster when it comes to DPS. We're talking about a class that can melt through bosses like they're paper, and handle both cold and lightning elements with finesse. You've got nodes like I Am Blizzard and I Am Thunder, which make you feel like a literal storm as you crush enemies with elemental fury. But wait, there's more. The Invoker isn't just about blowing things up, it's got some serious defensive capabilities too. Skills like, and Protect Me from Harm are perfect for keeping you alive while you're nuking everything around you. But here's the catch. Resource management is a bit tricky, and it's also pretty gear dependent, so you'll want to make sure your items are up to snuff. If you can handle that though, you're in for one wild ride. Next up, we've got the Infernalist class, which gives you a choice between two playstyles. First, you've got the Minion Master route, where you can summon a Hellhound to take the heat for you. This tanky buddy will redirect damage, allowing you to dish out some serious punishment without worrying too much about getting hit. It's a great balance of offense and defense, but if you're feeling a bit more daring, you can go the Demon Form route. Now this one is high risk, high reward. When you transform, you become a literal spell-slinging powerhouse, but there's a catch, your life drains fast. Sounds crazy, right? Well, With the right build, you can manage that resource drain and unleash an absolute barrage of devastating spells on your enemies. But again, it's a tricky balancing act. You've got to manage that demon form and keep your health in check. Now, let's talk about the Stormweaver class. This one's a bit of a glass cannon situation, so if you like to deal a ton of damage but can't take a hit, this might be your jam. The Stormweaver excels at applying ailments and absolutely dominating with AoE damage and crowd control. And here's the kicker, on your first ascendancy, you can grab Constant Gale, which grants you the Arcane Surge buff. This boosts your damage output and sets you up for some insane synergies with later skill nodes. It's like a snowball effect. You start off strong, and by the time you're late game, you're just melting everything in your path. But yeah, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with the Stormweaver. The class suffers from pretty low survivability, so you'll have to be on your toes. The damage potential is off the charts, but early on, it can feel like you're made of paper. Still, if you can make it through the rough patches, the payoff is more than worth it, as you can burn through enemies faster than they can blink. So, there you have it, the Invoker, Infernalist, and Stormweaver. 3 S-tier classes that can totally change the game, each with their own flavor of destruction. Whether you like the elemental mastery of the Invoker, the minion tanking power of the Infernalist, or the lightning fast damage of the Stormweaver, there's a ton of potential here. Just remember to manage your resources and survivability, and you'll be unstoppable. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.